Coming up next on This Week in Radio Tech, the FCC is proposing to eliminate the main studio rule for radio stations. That could have huge consequences, and also FM translators are in the news again with a window opening for AM stations to apply this summer. Larry Fuss is joining us to explain what that means. And as often the case, Chris Tobin is, well, you wouldn't believe where Chris Tobin is joining us today on This Week in Radio Tech. TWiRT is brought to you by the Telos Alliance and the new Omnia Volt audio processor. More processing power in one rack unit than others give you in 3. By BSW Broadcast Supply Worldwide, where Let's May a Deal is on. Check it out online and see what you can get this month. And by Lavo and the new Ruby Visual Radio Console. Ruby is a new kind of console for a new radio environment. Hey, it's This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host. Glad you're here. This is our 349th episode. What should we do for episode 350? We'll have a War Stories episode next week. This is the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to the light bulb at the top of the tower and all the stuff in between. And today we're going to be talking about some lot of potpourri, a lot of odds and ends, and some FCC stuff and some NAB stuff. That's all coming up on the show. So I'm Kirk Harnack, your host. Glad to be here. Glad that you joined us. I work for the folks at the Telos Alliance. So if you hear some bias in my voice, it's because of that. They're one of the advertisers on the show, and they also pay the salary at my regular job. So I really appreciate them. We have a couple other sponsors as well, including BSW, Broadcast Supply Worldwide, and also Lavo at lavo.com/TWiRT. We'll talk about all those in just a few minutes. We got a guest coming up here in just a minute. Also, Chris Tobin is working to get with us. He may be on some rooftop, who knows, some undisclosed location in the New York City area. But let's go ahead and bring in our guest right now. From Las Vegas, Nevada, it is my business partner, friend, and friend to the whole radio business, Larry Fuss. Larry, welcome in, buddy.
Thank you. First of all, Kirk, you got to say it right. It's Nevada.
Sorry about that. Las Vegas, Nevada. How'd you learn that?
Right. Well, I learned that after I moved here, because if you say Nevada, people will immediately think that you're a tourist or something. You're not from here.
Okay. Nevada. I know that, and I often don't remember to say it that way. Nevada just sounds more, I don't know, hip, cool, but it's Nevada.
Nevada.
Yeah. You always wanted to live there, didn't you?
Well, not always, but 13 and a half years ago, I moved here. It's a pretty cool place to live.
So, Larry, we'll give people some quick background. If you haven't already heard me talk about Larry, I've known you since what, 93 or so?
91.
91? Okay. We built a radio station in Cleveland, Mississippi together, along with a guy named Brad Young and a guy named Rob Sidney. Anybody else involved?
The late Jerry Johnson.
Oh, okay. The late Jerry Johnson. Maybe I met Jerry. I don't know if I did.
Yeah, you did. You did. Jerry owned Data Count, which sold the DART traffic system.
Of course. Yes, I know Jerry Johnson, of course. I was thinking of somebody else. So I've known you since 91. That's a long time. We built a bunch of radio stations. And famously, and I've used this as an example, we've used our experience in building radio stations in the Delta to point out that you don't have to be a millionaire to have a radio station. You can actually just about do it on a credit card if you're adventuresome enough and you're clever and willing to have a station that's not in a major metropolitan area. Was that fair enough?
I have done it on credit cards several times, in fact.
I know. I think you paid them back now, too.
American Express loves me.
We should do a show on that. Hey, let me real quick tell you what the show's about today. We're going to be talking about some of the items that are in the news and run over a couple of those right now. Some things that people have asked us to talk about. Some of these we're going to get to today. Others, I'm going to make a show out of one of these. For example, a fellow named Anthony asks about SIP and SAP as it relates to AES 67. That's a great subject. Anthony, I appreciate you chiming in on our Facebook page and asking for that subject. We will get to that. One thing we are going to try to talk about today, and that's translators. Daryl Parker, appreciate you chiming in, Daryl, very much. I've known Daryl for years. He was with TFT and is a great guy. Daryl asks about translators. We'll get to that question coming up, so we'll talk about translators. Let's see what else. SIP phones. We've talked a lot about SIP phones. We should do kind of a how-to on SIP phones, how to configure stuff. So that'll be that's Curtis Maychek asked about that. Nick Straka also asked about SIP phones, and also about ROI on old transmitters. In other words, you should probably buy a new transmitter to get some return on investment. Larry will be able to chime in with some thoughts about that. And and of course, our good friend Frederick Valou wants to talk about audio processing because he loves it. So we're going to have to put that off for a separate show. And we got a couple other subjects to talk about too, including this FCC proposing to eliminate the main studio rule. So all that with Larry Fuss is coming up. But right now, I want to remind you about one of our sponsors, near and dear to my heart, is the Telos Alliance. And a couple new products to talk about with the Telos Alliance. One of those is the new Omnia Volt. Now, you probably saw us or heard us talking about this at the NAB show where it was introduced, the Omnia Volt audio processor. It's a one rack unit audio processor. And it's the successor to the Omnia One. But the Omnia Volt is, people ask me, what's different about it? Well, the easiest way to say it is the Omnia Volt was designed, all the algorithms in it were designed after the Omnia 11 was designed. So take your hint from there. There is a lot in the Omnia Volt that is common to the Omnia 11 in terms of the algorithms and the sound. And it's really got a new clipper in it that Frank Foti, famous for his FM clippers, and Cornelius Gould, famous also for his audio processing algorithms, they came up with this together. And although Frank will blame his cat, I'm sure, the Omnia Volt is, for a one rack unit box, absolutely amazing what it can do. And the price is really right. I believe, if I got this right, the U.S. list price is still $3,495. Check with your dealer to see what your cost is, maybe higher or lower in some areas around the world. But you may be able to get a discount off that list price at $34.95 if you check with your dealer. So what else does the Omnia Volt have? Well, for one thing, it's really easy to change its processing style. So let's say you need a backup processor, but you also are responsible for several FMs and several AM radio stations. Well, you can keep both AM and FM processing loaded inside of it. And on a moment's notice, just go inside and bam, you can switch it from AM to FM, FM to AM. There's a studio processing mode, and there's also a digital or an HD processing mode. It's appropriate for any kind of bitrate reduced audio processing need, like your HD2 or 3 signal, or DAB, or streaming, or DRM. If you live in a country where DRM is coming online, then the Omnia Volt can take care of that for you as well. Beautiful front panel, plenty of information there with lots of LEDs to show you what's going on. And probably the biggest feature that people have been asking us for years, and we've got it in here. It's amazing. It's called Quick Tweak. And Quick Tweak allows you to very quickly go in and adjust the sound of the processor. Now, you're not adjusting every parameter in there, but you are adjusting a lot. When you go like, I want more bass, you're not just hitting a simple EQ. I mean, you could just go to the EQ and do that. But when you adjust it for more bass in the Quick Tweak, you're actually moving a bunch of parameters at the same time in a way that makes sense for all of them. So you won't get yourself in trouble with Quick Tweak. More highs, maybe less bass, maybe a little bit more of this punchiness, maybe a little more pizzazz, whatever. Go in there, maybe a little more clipping, but you can do it without getting yourself in trouble using this Quick Tweak feature. And here's what else is cool. You can use Quick Tweak from the front panel of the Omnia Volt, or you can use it from the app, from the web page. You just browse into the Omnia Volt, and it gives you, it's all HTML5. There's no Java necessary. You don't have to have a Java in your browser or Java running on your machine, your PC or your tablet or your smartphone. I've done all these. I've gone into it with the computer, with the tablet, and also over Wi-Fi with the smartphone. And it's just amazing. Hey, beautiful display. You can hit the buttons with your finger and adjust things, and it makes sense. The Omnia Volt, I just can't say enough good about it. It's really an amazing product. People who are reporting back to us are telling us it just sounds amazing, especially for a box that's well under $6,000 because it's $34.95. Check it out online. Go to the Omnia Volt at telosalliance.com. So go to telosalliance.com, go to products and audio processing, and check out the Omnia Volt. All right, Good. Thanks a lot to Omnia for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, we're here, Kirk Harnack, along with Larry Fuss. And is Chris Tobin, is he gotten online yet? Is he with us?
No, sir.
Maybe. Oh, okay. I see he's tried to log in a few times, but he's not got video yet. All right, so let's go ahead and hit these questions. Larry, I want to ask you first about this main studio rule. That's kind of the big thing that's in the news for the last day or two. First of all, if you could tell us, not everybody watching the show is a broadcaster. What is the main studio rule that we've had for decades and decades?
Well, currently you're required to maintain a main studio for your radio station within your city grade contour or within 25 miles of the tower site. And at the main studio, you are required to have a meaningful management presence. In other words, a full-time managerial person on the staff there. And they're proposing to do away with that. That's got pros and cons. A lot of stations don't really need a manager or somebody just sitting at a desk all day long anymore because it wastes time and money. The manager's time could be better spent out selling advertising or covering news stories or doing something else in the community. So doing away with that will help a lot of small stations maximize their resources. On the other hand, there's, a lot of bad operators out there, and it's going to allow stations to just close the door and walk away, and there'll never be anybody there but a computer. Not that there's not people doing that already.
Yeah. So
we know
in some situations you have a radio station that serves, in quotes, a community, but really is not involved in any way with that community. They're just trying to sell ads and extract money and, run the automation system. Yeah.
Yeah. If all you're running is a jukebox radio station anyway, then this may not have much impact on you because you're probably not following the rules anyway. But for some people that try to do the right thing, like our stations generally always have somebody at the station all day long. And that does tend to get to be kind of expensive in small markets. This would enable you to actually, like I said, go out and do things in the community and not be tied down to a desk.
But in the past, haven't stations been cited and fined for not having an actual management level person employed full time?
They have, and some stations have been cited for not even having video. The FCC inspector would show up in town looking for the radio station, and the local radio station was not there. I mean, they were on the air, but there was no studio. There was no physical presence. The automation system was in a closet somewhere, and that was not complying with the rules.
So you said that like let's say for an FM station, let's say what happens so often. You've got what we might call what we call the city of license. Let's say it's a west suburb, Atlanta. And then you've got the city of financial interest, as I call it, which might be Atlanta. So right. The city of license may be a long ways from Atlanta, and they found a place where the tower would fit and the signal would fit. So they just barely city grade, west suburb Atlanta. And then they also cover a good part or maybe even all of Atlanta with a good signal. There has to be and by the way, they put the studio in Atlanta because that's where the salespeople are and that's where they want to be an Atlanta radio station.
Right.
So, but little west suburb kind of gets forgotten. Is that what the FCC rules have tried to avoid happening, that the little suburb gets forgotten?
I'm not sure what the FCC rules have tried to do over the years, but a lot of these little small towns have been forgotten because their radio stations moved out of town. And in some cases, they changed their cities of license, but in others, they're still licensed to the small town, but they really don't do any meaningful service to the small town because their area of financial interest, as you described it, is elsewhere.
Yeah. So, okay. So for some people, eliminating the main studio rule could be a good thing. It could be less burdensome. On the other hand, it doesn't. Having the rule there maybe really didn't force people to pay attention to their city of license anyway, if it was also not their city of financial interest.
Well, true. Stations are going to go wherever the money is. And, a lot of cases over the years, the FCC has licensed stations to towns that are a little more than a wide spot on the map.
Mm-hmm. In order to get the station to move in closer to a city that of financial interest, they'd license it to some little wide spot.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, that's been prevalent for years, though. It wasn't necessarily because of the financial interest, but somebody was trying to squeeze a radio station into some area. And
Mhm.
so they picked a little bitty town, and so they could call it first local service.
Oh, first,
And
okay, yeah.
yeah, and so little bitty town got a radio station, even though it's not capable of supporting one.
Gotcha. Now, in the past, the FCC has granted a lot of non-commercial networks like EMF, Educational Media Foundation, waivers against the main studio rule, and that has allowed them to operate all of its stations basically as just a box in a rack room with the programming all coming from the handful of studios, somewhere else in Sacramento, or maybe they have something else that's regional. In theory, should the rulemaking be approved, commercial operators could do that same thing, eliminating all the local offices and have all their programming coming from just one studio or a few studio. That's what the folks at Radio Insight have said about the impact that this may have. Does that sound like what might happen, Larry?
Well, in theory, you could do that. Yes, you could have a bank of automation systems in Charlotte, for example, and having them feeding radio stations all over the country. But if you do that, what is going on in the local community? Local radio, you got to get out and you got to press the flesh. You got to go out and see people. You got to go march in parades. You got to go to the Rotary Club meetings, things like that. And if so, you turn all these small radio stations into nothing but a jukebox that's programmed from elsewhere. Are they really serving the local community?
I wonder if Chris Tobin is in now. He says he is. Chris, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, very well. How are you?
There we go. I'm doing very well. And I agree with Larry a lot. You do need to have localism. I don't think main studio rule disappearing is a good thing. But that's only my opinion.
So to both of you, it seems like that one thing that could happen, a non-radio model that does work like this might become without the main studio rule. Think about a company like Groupon. So Groupon has a national place where they operate out of, and then they put local salespeople in lots of cities and towns. Now, Groupon doesn't do anything locally like, do live radio remotes and things like that, but they sell competitively to radio, I guess, that they sell to local businesses a national level service. So you have salespeople and you have this national level service, but there's really no localism involved other than you can buy a Groupon coupon for some business near you and get some kind of deal. You could see radio going in that same direction. And of course, we think that generally speaking, that would be bad for radio. You'd have local salespeople, but nothing else that locally serves the market, that serves the people in the market. And when I say serve, that's kind of that word's kind of nebulous. What does that really mean? Well, doing live local radio remotes, doing ball games, having local news. What did the city council pass last night? What are they what's on the agenda coming up? If radio stations don't do that, then who does anymore? So I guess I'm getting at, yeah, this is going to help some people, but it could also further the perceived or complained about demise of local radio. So any thoughts about that comparison with Groupon, which already is national with local salespeople, but that's it? Chris, you have a comment about that?
Well, yeah. I mean, Groupon is a nice example of national sales for a widget or widgets. Radio or broadcasting let's remember what is the essence of broadcasting that we know it is in this country. I mean, there are some parts of the world where, FM stereo radio broadcast, commercial broadcast started in 1973. So, there's a whole broadcasting is very different than, say, selling sneakers to an audience across the nation from one location with local sales. There'll be like a ferry service that didn't have a dock, but it had the ability to go anywhere in the harbor, but didn't have to dock any one place because that's the location it's supposed to start and finish. I mean, what's the point of a radio station doing anything if you have no local studio and local presence? You're going to sell stuff. Yeah, you're selling air. What are you doing? You're selling advertising time for what? Local person. I'm McDonald's. I'm buying local radio through a national network. But really, the local radio is not local anymore. It's just, as you pointed out, jukebox. Well, technically, the phone I carry in my pocket is my new radio. It's my new source of information. So how do you expect to be competitive? That's like the Nash FM format for Cumulus. Nash is is Nashville, and it's great. It's all this stuff and the other stuff. Meanwhile, the Nash FM in, say, New York has no idea what's going on in New York City when it comes to country, which, by the way, New York City is the second largest country listening audience in the country after Nashville. And yet the local presence, I couldn't even tell you that Nash FM exists in New York City. I walk around, I travel around, I have no idea that they even exist here. I mean, visually, I know because I'm in the business, but if I'm an average listener that I'm trying to reach, nothing, upkiss. So if I'm an advertiser buying on the Nash FM and I want to buy New York, yeah, you're buying New York on paper, you're buying it in the sense that it's there, but there's no actual flesh meeting the pavement or, pressing the flesh phrase, whatever, as Larry pointed. And that's what local radio has always been. I mean, I've worked at stations where we did local and we made money hand over fist, where we had to actually sort of push off the national advertising because we didn't have enough room in the hour to do the spots. You don't hear that anymore. You're lucky you get national spots at buy.
I want to hear some of Larry's thoughts on localism, because Larry, you are the primary shareholder in several radio stations in small markets that don't have a larger market you're trying to hit. The only choice you have is to serve your local markets. Several towns in Mississippi, town in the whole main island in American Samoa, and Larry, you also belong to a group. You network with other station owners, many of whom are in small markets or medium-sized markets. Give us some of your thoughts on localism and what has happened to it, and do we have a continuing ability for broadcasters, radio broadcasters, to survive and even thrive in a small local market?
As long as they continue local programming, it's said that the three most important, is that right? The three most important things in small market radio is local, local, local. And our stations all have full-time local news people. That's something that a lot of stations did away with back after deregulation, when you were no longer required to do news. But we do news because that's stuff that people can't get elsewhere. You can read about it the next day in the newspaper, but news as it's happening, local radio is still the go-to place if you're doing local news. In American Samoa, for example, we have 3 full-time news people. That's highly unusual for, even medium market and some big market radio stations don't have that many news people. But it pays off for us because we are the station that people go to when they want to hear something. When something's happening in American Samoa, our radio stations are the ones that cover it.
Let's talk about some technology as it relates to local news, Larry. In Samoa, we're not doing this. We have 3 local people there. In your Mississippi markets, you're using some technology that helps the 1 or 2 people who are gathering news to get it on the air and get it on the website and keep it fresh. What can you tell us about the technology that's helping us cover local news in those markets, small markets?
Well, we're using some software called Virtual Newsman that was written by Tom Churchill, the same guy that wrote Virtual Weatherman years ago. And basically, it assembles a fresh newscast every hour based on stories that are pre-recorded throughout the day. And it's hard to explain, but it's just really cool. All 6 of our radio stations have a fresh newscast every hour, all day long. And if something breaking happens, and we had this happen earlier today, they'll go and they'll drop in the bulletin in a folder in Dropbox. The automation systems will ingest it and play it as the next event. And it really helps get stuff on the air quickly.
Wow. So I know I work with you doing some engineering, but pretty much I take care of the hardware and you guys handle all the things the software does. So breaking news, we can get that on as many as 6 stations basically automatically, huh?
Yeah, within minutes. They record the bulletin, like I said, drop it into a Dropbox folder, and as long as it's named whatever the appropriate name is, then the automation sees that and says, oh, here's a bulletin, and it ingests it and inserts it automatically as the next event in the log.
Wow. And the other aspect you mentioned, so early in the day, a news person records each individual story and that they have available to them, and then throughout the day these get rearranged in some way so they sound fresh.
Yeah, they record 8 news stories fresh every morning, and then every newscast does not include all 8 stories. It includes 3 or 4, but the order gets mixed up throughout the day, and new stories can be dropped in throughout the day. For example, if one of the older stories or one of the original 8 is kind of out of date or something new comes in, you drop a new one into the folder, and all of a sudden it shows up in the rotation with all the others.
So
and you can do that as
also,
many times a day as you have new stories.
okay. So when you get new stories, you can put them in, and if you get a stringer from some town, you can get them to record something either by phone or on their phone, and send the file in. Okay.
Right.
And I guess and in Mississippi Delta area, there's not always 8 stories that are local, so I guess there's a little bit of regional news going in as well, huh?
Correct. The regional news, state news. Correct.
Yeah. And then isn't there an online aspect to this as well?
Yeah,
like an online newspaper.
Each of those 8 stories and whatever updates are done automatically get posted to our online service, which is called deltadailynews.com. And then from there, they also get posted on Facebook and Twitter and maybe something else too. I don't know. But the story on Delta Daily News, it's the text of the story and the audio of each story. On Facebook, it's the text. It's a teaser of the text, but if you click on that, it'll take you back to Delta Daily News, where you can then read or listen to the full story.
Wow. So if there are engineers, hey, engineers, if you want to apprise your station owner, your station management of maybe a cool way to handle localism, to get local, you can go to Larry and mine, to our website, deltadailynews.com, and see what that can look like automatically assembled. So there's 0 time spent in layout, and 100% of the time that is spent in gathering and writing the news stories. So it's pretty efficient, right, Larry?
Yeah, one thing you do have to do is each news story has a picture attached to it. And so they find pictures to go with each news story. Typically, if it's something local, if it's something the mayor said, we've got a stock picture of the mayor that we'll put up there. Or if it's a fire, then the stringer will have taken a picture of the fire. But if it's anything else, we try to find a stock photo that's not copyrighted, because you can get in trouble for stealing people's photos and posting them on the web.
Yeah. I see we had this breaking news story you mentioned today about Greenville is organizing getting water for residents of Vicksburg. 30,000 people have been without water for up to a week now.
That's the story. They're loading up a tractor trailer, and we're promoting that heavily on the air today at all of our radio stations, which is another good example of localism.
Wow.
Vicksburg is probably maybe 50 miles away from Greenville, but they're kind of sister cities because they're both located along the Mississippi River. And so the people in Greenville are doing what they can to help get water to Vicksburg, and our radio stations are at the forefront.
I want to bring Chris back in. Chris, you know what I see here is I see a need that for a technological solution, and that the need is that small radio stations, small radio markets can't afford to hire lots of news people, or even 2 or 3. So we've got this very efficient technological solution where we just keep 8 stories fresh, and the computer system, the software, takes care of not only publishing it on the radio with fresh sounding newscasts, but also putting it on this website, deltadailynews.com. Now, I always think of you, Chris, as being a big market guy, because you're there in New York City, and it seems like having lots of employees is rarely a problem there. But to me, it's an example of what's the mother of invention? Having a need is necessity. That's it. Necessity is the mother of invention. Chris, how might this relate to stations in your market, if at all?
Well, the stations in this market do that sort of already with the wire services. I think what Larry's talking about makes total sense. And if you're a small operation or medium size, and you don't have the wherewithal to staff it the way you think you should, that is definitely a way to augment your localism and stay in touch with the community. That's what an editor does. An editor does a nice job of finding the stories, putting it together to tell the story about what's going on locally. So you could actually have 1 or 2 persons in your newsroom doing the actual editing and putting it together, and the information, the ingesting of the news can still come in from other sources. Then you package it and turn it around. But that's that's definitely a way. I know a lot of places I've traveled to that do it already, and they have someone in house locally to put the local flavor or tie it together, if you will. So when you're listening, it's not just somebody reporting a story from outside or reading about something. There's a person who's actually relating to it, so you get the connection. But yeah, the technologies are there. I think part of the problem, and I'm not a station owner, so full disclosure, I have no idea of all the intricacies of what it takes, but I've worked with many. I think what's happened is we have to get back to this, as Larry said earlier. You got to press the flesh. You got to get back to being in a business. Just it's business. It's it's not a Groupon model for this particular case in this business. It's communicating, connecting with your audience, whether it's radio, whether it's television. And look at the internet stations. Look at people who provide, like what we're doing this week in Radio Tech, is a podcast. It's distributed over a non-traditional medium. And it works, and people are tuned in. They follow. Why? Because we make the connection. How many radio stations can you think of that do that anymore? That they're just a jukebox, and how many of them really do any good? So to speak. I shouldn't say do good. They make money, or they just barely cover their expenses, and then they complain the industry is in the doldrums. Well, it's not. They're just not making the connection. So, as the old saying goes, if you can't make the connection, there's no call to be made. If you have no ticky, there's no laundry. Those are the things that you have to worry about, and nobody is paying attention. Instead, they're just crying, woe is me. I think Larry's got a great idea of what he's doing and the way it works, and what he's told me when we had lunch in Vegas, and the things that you guys work on and do. It works. It makes sense, and more people should be doing it.
We are talking about a number of different things in radio. We've been talking about this main studio rule. The FCC is considering doing away with the main studio rule, and most of us think that has some upsides, but maybe might continue to contribute to how easy it is to just run a jukebox radio station, and we don't think that's good, but that's our opinion. Hey, coming up, we're going to be talking about FM translators and kind of what the situation is there. What's coming up? There's an opening for translators for AM, and we're going to talk with Larry about that. Larry's done a lot of work with translators, so that is coming up. Our show, This Week in Radio Tech, is brought to you in part by the folks at bswusa.com. That's Broadcast Supply Worldwide, and I think we have a little video to show you. It's pretty funny, so put your funny hat on and let's take a look at this video from BSW USA.
Yo. Phil McCavity here for the BSW Company. You might remember me from my crack reporting from the NAB show floor. Yes, that was me. Get excited. Did you know that April showers bring May deals? Well, now you do. It's BSW's Let's May a Deal promo, fresh on the heels of the 2017 NAB convention, where broadcast is king. BSW has some deals for you. Let's take a look.
The Audio-Technica BPH-1 3 for 2 package. That's right. Buy 2 BPH S1 broadcast headsets and receive the third free. 3 for the price of 2.
So if I buy 2, I get a third. That third is free, but for the price of... Well, hey there. Just working out the math for you. Welcome back. And oh boy, there is more where that came from. I spotted this little gem at NAB 2017.
Fresh from the floor, the new Arrakis Arc Talk Blue console. 5 mic channels, 2 Bluetooth channels, and only $10.49.
While it's my civic duty to BSW and broadcasters alike to inform you on the fancy schmancy deals, it is also my duty to tell you what's not for sale.
The air-conditioned lawnmower, the Ice Cube hangover mask, the Hat Radio.
Hold on. You mean I've been mowing my lawn without air conditioning? Ha! What will they come up with next? How about a sweet deal on a microphone processor? Yep.
Air Tools 2X Dual Channel Voice Processor. Dual Channel Microphone Processor for one heck of a deal. Enter Airball on bswusa.com and receive $350 off this infamous processor from Air Tools.
And I'm back. Good thing, because then someone else would be. Then I could not afford the Hat Radio. Quick recap. BSW brings you savings. BSW brings you same-day shipping until 7 p.m. Eastern Time. BSW brings you almond roca candy. Sweet. Now, let's make a deal so we can get some almond roca candy. Hopefully you'll share. If not, I have an in with the marketing guy. Thanks for watching. BSW out. Or mic drop, or whatever the kids say these days. Yes, sir. Don't hear that too often.
They're having a big sale called Let's May a Deal. Obviously, it's still May, so it's still going on. And you need to give them a call or go to their website, bswusa.com. And if you're not getting their catalog, you ought to sign up for that. It's a good deal. And, people use the BSW catalog as a reference, even if they're calling another sales outfit. So it's a really, really good catalog. It's just out for their email alerts, too. Good deal. Let me see if there's anything else I need to mention about that. They are having a great deal on the Air Aura X1 from Wheatstone. Also, a price drop on the Henry Engineering Mic Alert Tally Light controller. You might need that. Handheld recorder for use in your local news department. The Tascam DR05 is now an extra $20 off. And they're having trade-in rebates on Orban broadcast gear as well. So check it all out at bswusa.com. Let's May a Deal. All right. Hey, you're watching This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack, along with Chris Tobin, and Larry Fuss is here as well. So let's get on with talking about translators. This has been a subject that's been in the news a bit. Larry, I'm always surprised and dumbfounded when you send me an email and say, hey, Kirk, we got a translator over here. We got a translator over there. Let's feed this audio here. Let's feed this audio there. Can you kind of give us a little state of the state speech about translators and then what is coming up next in terms of translators for AM radio stations?
Well, first of all, Kirk, I do have this and it matches my shirt. See?
Yeah.
Translators. Well, we were one of the original AM stations that had a translator when the word came out that AM stations could get translators. Our news talk station in Greenville, Mississippi procured a translator. And hundreds of others have done so since then. The last thing that happened was this 250-mile window where the commission would let you buy a translator that was located anywhere within 250 miles and move it into your city, and you could even change the frequency of it. But that's over with now. The next thing that's coming up in July is a new filing window for translators, and this is for the regional AMs and the old Class 4s. I think they call them Class Ds now. They can now apply, if they don't have a translator already that was obtained under the 250-mile rule, they can apply for a new translator, assuming they can find a frequency that will fit. There are some people who seem to think, oh, the commission's going to give me a translator. Well, no, you've got to find a frequency that will fit and apply for it. And if you're in a congested area where nothing will fit, then you're just out of luck. But luckily, in some of the small rural areas, there are still frequencies where translators will fit.
There are plenty of, as you say, Class 4s or now Class Ds. Those were the old ones that forever were 1,000 watts day and 250 watts night, non-directional, on frequencies like 1450 and 1340, and I'm sure you know all the rest. And it even when I was started in broadcasting, 35 years ago, it was the case that at night you could see the tower and it was on, but you couldn't pick it up on your radio. You might be 8, 9, 10 miles away from it, be able to see it on the hilltop over there, and there was so much interference coming in. So then the FCC let us raise that power from 1,000 watts day, 250 night, to 1,000 watts day and night. And
well,
they started a little bit.
Yeah. They started out as 250 day and night.
Yeah.
Years ago.
Well, that's before my time.
Yeah, the 1,000 watts day was a later thing, and they kept the nighttime power at 250, but then you're right, they raised it to 1,000 watts day and night. But all that did was increase the noise level too, so they don't really get out any further.
Yeah, you're right. So the idea there is that translator. Now, Larry, you reminded me that in Greenville, Mississippi, we have an AM station, WNIX, and we've got a translator for that. Can you tell what our listenership is on the translator? If it shuts off, do we get phone calls?
I don't really keep up with who's listening to AM or FM, but every now and then somebody will call, and I try to ask them. Most of the calls we get, though, tend to be people that are listening to the AM, because the AM does get out a lot further than the transmitter, than the translator. We happen to be in a area of good ground conductivity, so our AM does have really good coverage in the daytime.
Gotcha. Well, if I'm driving around the area, and I will be in a few weeks, coming back down there to do some engineering work, if I'm listening to a show, of course, it sounds better on the FM. They are co-located. By the way, they're co-located. Is that unusual to have your AM and your AM's translator in the same exact place?
No, it's not unusual. In our case, it's because it's all we had. We had to put the translator on the AM's tower, which is only 200 feet tall. But if you're in an area where you can put the translator on a big, tall tower, like a TV tower, or even on a mountaintop, you can get much better coverage. Our FM doesn't have great coverage because it's 200 feet in the air.
So, and maybe you can help me understand how the translator rules work. We do have access to a taller tower, about 11, 12 miles away. Why couldn't our translator go there?
Well, it could, but with 250 watts, 11 miles out of town, it's going to be a really weak signal.
Yeah, true. Okay. Yeah.
And the cool thing about translators, too, even though you're limited to 250 watts ERP, you're not limited to any specific height. You're only limited based on, contour overlap and interference concerns. So you can actually put a 250 watt translator. Well, in American Samoa, for example, we have one that's on a 1,600 foot tall mountain. It has coverage equivalent to a full 6 kilowatt Class A.
Wow. Hey, and maybe you could kind of fill us in on something else here, and if Chris wants to chime in too, because I don't know how translators work in a very congested area like the New York City area, but translators for FM stations and the legal machinations to make that work versus translators for AM stations. Larry, what's the fundamental difference in how you get these licensed and their purpose?
Well, originally translators were meant to be filling in service in your service area where you were shadowed by a mountain or something like that. And then out west, they were meant to bring service to very small rural communities that didn't have service. That was widespread all over Utah and Wyoming and places like that, where they would bring in a station from Phoenix or Salt Lake City or whatever, because there was no local service in these little towns. And that's what the translators were originally meant for. But then they started popping up where stations were using them to rebroadcast themselves within their own contour because of a shadow or whatever. And then they passed the rule allowing AMs to use translators. And then they started allowing stations to rebroadcast their HD2, 3, or 4 on a translator. And that opened up a whole bunch of more, technically, I guess you could call them new radio stations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have one here in Nashville doing that. It's a translator. It's well located in downtown Nashville for the transmitter, and it's rebroadcasting a station's HD2, and it's a format that previously hadn't been here in Nashville. So, with all this talk of translators and what the FCC will approve them for use for, as you said, they still have to fit. You have to find a frequency that doesn't interfere. Does that always require a study, an FCC consulting engineer to determine that?
Unless you have the capability of doing it yourself, then yes, you've got to hire somebody who knows how to do translators to do the application for you and get it on file. And you've got to show that the interfering and protected contours of the transmitter are not going to overlap the interfering and protected contours of any co-channel and adjacent channel stations.
Yeah. Okay. In your opinion, from what you've seen, are the current rules about right regarding interference to co or adjacent channels, or do you think that'll be stricter or loosened up more?
Well, I know there's been some stations that complained that their coverage was being hampered by new translators that popped up. There was a case here recently in, I believe it was North Carolina, where a station had a co-channel translator put on the air. I want to say it was like 38 miles from them, which technically, that's outside the 1 millivolt contour of a Class A station. But in a lot of cases, Class A's still have coverage out that far. And this station was getting severe interference from this translator and managed to get the commission to shut them down. But the NAB's got a petition for rulemaking they have filed recently, and I don't really know all the particulars of it, but they're trying to make it so that if a translator is causing interference to a full power station, the translator could then be allowed to switch to any other available frequency on the dial. Right now, you can only go up 3 channels or down 3 channels.
Ah, okay. Well, which to me seems very arbitrary. You ought to be able to, well, okay, here's another frequency that'll fit. Doesn't matter that it's 3 channels away or more than 3 channels away. It'll fit and work. Let's move there.
And that's what they're asking in the petition that's been filed.
Yeah, yeah. Chris Tobin, what's the translator situation like in the New York area market? Do you actually have some there?
There are a few. I have to be honest. I have not looked into it. I mean, I hear talk all the time of translators this, translator that. I haven't really looked to see where things stay at the moment. But it's pretty compact here in the metro area. So if we do have any popping up and around, it's very few. I know that take that back. There are about a half a dozen I remember reading about over the last 2 years.
And New York is kind of a special situation because you've got 2 huge population centers, New York and Philadelphia, and they're I mean, inches from each other in terms of squeezing full power FM stations in there. Am I correct?
That's correct, and you have to also remember Central New Jersey has a few stations that are Class Bs, 50 kilowatts that reach into pretty much both markets. So the New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia corridor is very crowded. Yes, very crowded.
Yeah. Wow. So, Larry, in your view, translators, I mean, are they an effective means to reach more people? Because when I listen to FM, I'm typically mobile, and I'm thinking the translator just is only going to cover half of my trip or a part of my trip, or it's going to be, bad reception for a while. What if, I mean, contrast, Larry, for a world with translators as we use them now, or a world without translators that we just had the full power stations? Do you think they're really on balance, really helpful?
Well, translators are never going to have the coverage of a full power radio station. They're just not. But if you're in a small market or an isolated place, take Las Vegas, for example. There are translators popping up all over Las Vegas. And one of them, I was noticing this morning in one of the radio trade newsletters, had a tremendous share in the recent Nielsen. They're programming an urban format, which is fed via an HD2 of some other radio station, and it's being carried on this analog translator. Well, most of the listenership, as we all know, is to the analog translator because very few people have or even know how to work their HD radios. And so this station was filling a need in the market. Las Vegas has never had an urban radio station before. Now it does.
Wow. Hard to believe that Las Vegas hasn't had an urban radio station.
Well, there's been a non-com, but there was never, as far as I know, there was never on FM anyway, a full service FM radio station programming urban. This one's programming big boy and rap and hip hop, but basically the same thing we do on one of our stations in Mississippi.
So it's, and I believe is the one you're speaking of, got a well-located transmitter, maybe at the stratosphere?
It may be. A lot of the local translators are on top of the stratosphere, yes. Which is centrally located. Yeah.
Yes.
And
pretty tall.
Right. And, Las Vegas is not spread out like Atlanta is, for example. Las Vegas sits down in a bowl surrounded by mountains on all 4 sides. And if you're on a building the size of the stratosphere in the middle of that bowl, then you're going to cover the whole market.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Wow. So, Larry, you understand have recently been elected as an NAB board member. You represent a certain geographical area of broadcasters for the NAB board. I guess you probably have a disclaimer if you're going to say, because I'm going to ask you about what's going on with NAB. We just got done with the show, and maybe you can tell us some things going on at NAB, but what's your disclaimer?
Remember, anything I say here is just some old radio guy rambling. It's no reflection on the NAB or any position the NAB may have. But yes, I am the NAB board member for District 20-something, which is American Samoa, where we have 2 radio stations. Also Guam, Hawaii, Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, and bonus points if you can find that on a map, and also Southern California.
Oh, Southern California. Okay, so you represent some broadcasters there, in a little more dense area where there's
like LA and San Diego. Yeah.
Ah, okay. Well, good deal. So, I'm curious about that. As an NAB board member, what's your interaction with stations, and how do you, or is there opportunity to take that back to NAB board meetings?
Yeah, I do try to interact as much as possible. Matter of fact, I went to the Hawaii Association of Broadcasters meeting just about 2.5 weeks ago and
Rough trip,
interacted
yeah.
there. Yeah, it's a tough gig. And also, when I was in American Samoa 2 weeks ago, we started what may become the American Samoa Broadcasters Association. There's only, I think, 6 operators there between the commercials and the non-coms, but we got us all together, or at least all the ones that would show up, and we sat around and talked about all the things that we were all concerned about. And so there may not ever be an official American Samoa Broadcasters Association, but we can have a little informal gathering anytime we want to. I've not yet been to Southern California. I do know some of the broadcasters there and have reached out to them, but they don't have a regular convention like they do in Hawaii in some states. So I haven't networked, with them as much. I have in the past been to Guam and Saipan, but not since I've been on the board.
As an NAB board member, are you representing both radio and television interests in your geographical area?
No, just radio. There is a separate television board. The radio board is elected by districts, and mine was the territory I described. Television board members are all elected at large.
Oh, okay. So, what what goes on at these meetings? I mean, are there some pressing issues that NAB, I mean, that you actually get to contribute to, or at least find out where the NAB stands on some things?
Well, mostly it's just guys sitting around smoking cigars and drinking. But no, really. I'll get in trouble for that. No, all the issues are pretty well discussed beforehand, either by email or on conference calls, and then we all get together 3 times a year and have the formal board meetings, and that's when things are voted on as to what kind of position NAB is going to take on certain things.
Yeah, actually, that sounds a lot like the SBE board meetings, where we all pretty know what's going to be talked about and what the positions are beforehand, thanks to conference calls and phone calls and emails and things like that. So it's more of the board meetings become a formality, although there's a lot of detail going on. So, in the past, I've never really been terribly involved with NAB, except to go to the big show in Las Vegas in the spring, present some papers and things like that. So but I don't know, as a broadcast owner along with you, as an engineer, working for a manufacturer, I don't really know day in, day out how what NAB does affects me. But now I see a lot of stuff coming out of NAB, especially about this ATSC 3.0 for the new television standards. Since you've been a board member, have you become more aware of what NAB is doing for broadcasters, especially maybe on Capitol Hill legislatively?
I have. First and foremost, NAB is a lobbying organization, and they fight the fight of broadcasters on Capitol Hill. One of the things the NAB has fought off in recent years has been the performance tax. And if that passes, then we've all got to open up our checkbooks and start writing more checkbooks to greedy bastards that want money. And the NAB has successfully held that at bay for years. And it comes up again every year because the music industry, they want more money, and they think that all of us in radio are rolling in it, and so they want their share. The NAB fights that fight, and I wish more stations were members of the NAB. I didn't realize it, but fewer than half the stations in the country are members of the NAB, even though the NAB is fighting for all of us.
Wow. Well, Chris, what's been your interaction with NAB, if much of any?
Unfortunately, not much at all. Just working with NAB members as stations, just engineering support stuff. That's it. Nothing directly.
Yeah.
I've lost favor with them over the years because it's just, as Larry pointed out, they're a lobbying group, and I'm sometimes concerned about their ideas or visions as to where things should be going for the industry. And I know it's probably driven more by who's got the larger wallet, but it's just, I'm hoping ATSC 3.0 is the injection needed for television to get back into doing what they did best in the old NTSC days. With OFDM carriers, you should be able to do more mobile and portable stuff because it's really that's the only way it's going to help them. Because if you're going to rely on cable distribution, and as Larry pointed out, there are other industries trying to sock us with money, grubby hands, if you will, hands out. TV is probably going to be up against the cable distribution monopolies as to must carry. That'll be the next big frontier and stuff. So ATSC 3.0, I hope people start to really take advantage of and realize there's something there.
Tell you what, friends, you are watching or listening to This Week in Radio Tech, where it's episode 349. We're talking with Larry Fuss and Chris Tobin about a lot of various issues. We've focused on translators and FCC main studio rule right now. And, oh, look at that view. Oh, my goodness. Wow. Looks like you're in Brooklyn.
No, I'm on the other side of Brooklyn. That is the Brody Bridge. I mean, the Brooklyn Bridge.
Gotcha. Okay. Oh, yes. Now I had my perspective backwards. Gotcha. Wow. Oh, are you where I think you are? I'm sorry, your audio just went away.
No?
Video froze.
Oh, look at that. How about that? Okay, I'm not sure why that happened, but all right. That's very interesting. Oh, look at that.
But it looks like you're in a fairly new building.
Yes, it's a fairly new building, and I'm actually above the helicopters going by doing traffic reports. It's pretty cool.
Oh my goodness! Oh wow! Hey, we got to take a quick break here. When we come back, we got one more short segment to do, and I was right on the tip of my tongue what we were going to chat about. And oh, good golly, about what?
Transmitters and the power bill.
Transmitters and the power bill. That was one thing. That's not what I was thinking of though. But plus I think that's what we'll talk about. I know, I'm getting old too. Our show This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you in part by our friends at Lavo, L-A-W-O, Lavo, and their website. And if you would type these extra letters, it'd be very good. Go to Lavo, LAWO.com/TWiRT, T-W-I-R-T. When you do, if you type in Lavo.com/TWiRT, you will be taken direct. You won't have to worry with all the big consoles and the TV stuff. You'll be taken directly to their Radio On Air page. And that's where you can see, read about, and watch videos about their radio consoles meant specifically for radio. And hey, Lavo is a company that's known for their great, big, huge consoles, the kind that go into TV trucks and into permanent venue locations that are used for television coverage of huge events, and like the Olympics. And but this page is just for us radio people at This Week in Radio Tech. Radio consoles, also virtual radio consoles. Those are slick. We've talked about those quite a while for a long time. And also their routing systems, very much worth checking out to see how they're using audio over IP. And the new subject, which is virtual radio and their relay product. So that's basically one box, one small rack of stuff, and you've got a whole radio station virtually. Plus their brand new console they just introduced at NAB, and that's the new Ruby console. They're calling it their visual radio console. It's a whole new way of thinking about radio workflow, where physical and on-screen multi-touch controls combine to give the on-air talent a revolutionary new way to create. So many automatic functions really make the job a pleasure and keep everybody sounding really good. Plus, there is the Lavo upgrades to their relay software as well. This company's been around a long time and makes really reliable hardware with well-tested software. The folks at Lavo, LAWO.com. I have seen these consoles in places all over the world, and I would encourage you to check it out as well. Lavo's very much into audio over IP. They are part of the Ravenna standard for AOIP. They are compatible with AES 67, so you get all the benefits of that when you jump into the world of Lavo and audio over IP. So again, the website, Lavo, LAWO.com/TWiRT. Please check them out, and we encourage you to do so. Thanks so much to Lavo for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, let's hit this last subject then, the one that Larry suggested, because I did say it earlier, and that's return on investment. One of the things we talked about in a number of episodes has been an easy return on investment of switching from traditional telco services, which have gotten just crazy expensive in a lot of cases. I just heard of ISDN lines for $900 a month. Holy cow. I mean, that's like 10 times what they used to be 20 times if you lived in Tennessee. And all the good ROI you can get when you switch over to SIP services or SIP-based services. But transmitters are another area where you can also save some money. I was at a station just yesterday, WRBS in Baltimore, where they have a couple of new Nautel solid-state transmitters. They're so quiet. I know they've got fans in them, but they are so quiet that they actually had to label which one was on the air. They have two identical, main and backup. They stuck a sticky note on there. This one's on the air. This one's not on the air. So I know running so quiet, they're getting great efficiency and saving money. And Larry Fuss, you've been around, big and small tube transmitters. We have maintained them together. And in the last few years, you've been able to purchase some solid-state transmitters. Talk to us about newer transmitters and your power bill, since you write the checks.
Well, we had we had an old RCA transmitter at one of our stations, an AM station, and that's actually one of the tubes from it right there.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
That thing used electricity, and I want to say the power bill back then was $600 or $700 a month. We no longer own that station, but we put in a BEAM1A before we sold it, and the power bill dropped literally in half because of the efficiency of the solid state transmitter.
Yeah. And then there's some FMs as well. Now we don't have any high power FM transmitters, but we do have a 2.5 kilowatt FM transmitter, and we run it at absolutely full bore. And I know it's more efficient than what it replaced. Can you speak to us about the power bill there?
That power bill went down too. It replaced a transmitter that had, I think, 2 tubes in it, and the power bill has gone down significantly there as well. It's a little Nautel VS 2.5.
Yeah, that new one is, and it's been a dream to work with, and that's on the small end of the scale. Chris Tobin, you're around some bigger solid state transmitters there. Can you talk to us about return on investment savings there?
Chris has stepped away for a minute.
Oh, okay, no worries, gotcha. It looks like All right. Well, then, I'll tell you what, we're gonna wrap it up pretty soon because we're about out of time. Larry, let's just finish the ROI discussion then. As a small market broadcaster, and I know you talk to other small and medium market broadcasters in the international group that you're a part of. It seems like this is something that broadcasters have to do. I mean, one way to make money is to save money. And if you can spend money and see a return on investment of 2, 3, 4 years in terms of either telco savings or electricity savings, how does that work out for you and your bottom line and your ability to borrow money so you can get something new that's better and make it pay off in a relatively short time?
Well, I'm always looking for ways to save money. So if some new product or new technology comes along that will help me be more efficient and save money, then I do my best to try to procure it and put it in use. And you were mentioning I'm part of a group. It's called the International Broadcasters Idea Bank. There's 100 members, and we're spread out all over the world, basically. But we get together and have our own conventions every year, and we basically share ideas and talk about things that that'll benefit our radio stations. And it's a really good group, but I can't tell you anything that we say because then I'd have to kill you.
Okay. But the idea there is you do share ideas about how to sell advertising, be effective, save money, run your radio stations better. And I've been to I was invited to sit in on one meeting as your guest, and it was a really terrific meeting. So the information that comes out of that results in the practices that you undertake, and really it's those practices that we're talking about.
Right. I picked up a lot of good ideas from that group, and matter of fact, I'm going to another meeting next week.
Oh, okay. We'll bring back some more ideas. Tell them how much money that you saved. Saving money isn't always convenient. I mean, we've had a few phone problems lately, so but we sure have saved a ton of money. And look, think about just on the phone issue. If we're spending, and I'm going to make up a number here, about $100 a month now on the phone services that we deal with, compared to it would have been probably $600, $700, $800 a month for comparable services had we continued with traditional telco. That's let's say a minimum. That's $500 a month that we don't have to spend anymore on telephone services that we're able to spend on equipment or paying other bills, paying employees and so forth. So saving money is a really good thing because it gives you that opportunity to take that money and do something else with it. Wouldn't you say, Larry?
Well, yeah, and it's hard in small markets nowadays to even generate revenue to pay the bills. So every dollar we can save is very beneficial.
Indeed, indeed. Hey, we're out of time. Larry, I want to thank you for coming on with us and kind of filling us in, especially on the translators and the main studio rule. Really interesting stuff. I appreciate that.
Glad to be here.
And Chris Tobin, he has stepped away. Oh, he's here. Hey, Chris, welcome back.
I'm here. No,
Okay.
I've been here. Just,
I was told you stepped away.
Oh,
well, I don't want to end the show without giving you. Oh my goodness, there we go. So, what's that island? What's the name of that island?
Governor's Island, and that's the Staten Island Ferry in the foreground. That yellow orange.
And it's a live picture. It's moving.
This is live. This is real time video.
Wow.
At the top of a building in New York City. I'm giving you landmarks you can recognize. So the Brooklyn Bridge, and then Governor's Island, because the video cam is being blown out by the sun that's setting to the west, which is to the right of the camera. And then we can take a look down below. And there's little people there, look like ants running around. There's the plaza. There you go. And let's see what we can see over here. There's some more stuff to see.
There's the big dead whale.
That is the big dead whale. Yes, exactly. So there we go. And I'm just in a room getting ready for transmitter installations.
Wow. Wow. Is that something you'll be able to tell us more about later?
Yeah. This was a last minute thing. I wasn't planning on being here today, so I got called in for something at around 4:30 and rushed up the elevators. So it was pretty good.
Like during or after the transmitter installations, would you be able to give us a little visual on that process?
Yes, I'm working on that. I've been taking pictures, talking to folks. I'm in conversations trying to see what makes sense. So yeah, we'll have something.
Well, I got to tell you that the next 2 weeks of our show are already booked, but in 3 weeks, we would be available. Do you think 3 weeks from now might be a time you could show anything interesting from there?
Actually, you know what? Let's see. Looking at
might
the
be done by then.
Well, no. But there is a couple of things that have to happen in the next couple of weeks. So let me check. I may be able to make something happen, at least a start. You know, there'll be several episodes. Installments.
Gotcha. Well, 3 weeks from today would be the first opportunity to actually spend a whole show with what you've got up there, if that's possible.
Just laying the groundwork starting tomorrow, and I'll let you know in a day or two what I can make happen.
Cool. All right. Thanks so much. And Chris, if you've got a tip, we got a minute. If you don't, I totally understand.
I have a tip for you all. Coming up May 31st is the SBE RFR or RF Safety Seminar. I recommend people do it. I do it every year. I do an RF seminar for several places that I do work with. And the reason I say this is it's very important to know that RF can hurt. Even something as simple as this small little handheld radio could be a dangerous item. Understand the rules and regulations, the FCC, both IEEE and OSHA, and understand that it's very important to know when to climb, not to climb, or when to work around RF stuff that could be hazardous. Safety is first, definitely every year, and you'll get a certificate, something that says you've participated. It's not something fancy, but at least it can help if you're working at a site, if you're a multi-tenant site, and there's an RF safety officer, which is required for anything above a level 2 RF site, and at least they'll say that, okay, you've been trained, or you understand, we can let you into the area and work with our folks. So it's very important. Even if you're a single tower owner with only a single setup, which is yours, and you have tower crews that come out, you still should be aware of RF safety, because you're supposed to have an RF safety officer on site with a plan, so there's you maintain the safety of the workers and employees.
Gotcha. That would be we ought to do a show about RF safety. That would be worthwhile if we could get a guest. Obviously,
I can do that.
Of course, again. Yeah,
I can get somebody.
That would be good.
Yep.
All right. Hey, we got to go. Thanks to all of you in the audience for being with us. Appreciate you downloading the show or watching live. Tell your friends about it. Hey, the best thing you can do is on the YouTube channel, you can subscribe, and that way you get notified when we have a new show in case you forget. You can also subscribe or become our friend on Facebook or on Twitter. We have we're both of those places. This Week in Radio Tech or TWiRT. I think on Twitter we're TWiRT Show. At TWiRT Show, and we try to announce, what's coming up on those channels as well. Thanks so much for being to Suncast for being the producer on today's show. Appreciate it. And we always keep him busy, and he does a great job. Thanks to Andrew Zarian, who is probably comforting a puking baby right now. So appreciate that. Appreciate your network here, Andrew. And thanks again to Chris Tobin in New York City and Larry Fuss in Las Vegas. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye, everybody.